provide Mom with a list?
Well, he was providing for introductions, so I would consider the roll call and introductions.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, 2 birds, 1 stone.
We got a good pledge first.
Okay, okay. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so introduction of budget committee members.
Susan Swander, citizen.
Okay,
Dakota Hartzell.
Louise Soliday.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
Kevin Battles, Rita Ackerman.
Having trouble?
Yeah.
So now we need to have an election for the chairperson. We always do the chairperson of the budget committee is not necessarily a board member, can also be a layperson. So do I hear any nominations for chair?
I so move to nominate Joe Vandehay.
I second that. Nominations be closed.
Hearing no other nominations, Mr. Vandehay. Hearing no other nominations, Mr. Vandehay can now take over the meeting.
Okay, we're now going to call to order, pledge allegiance, introduction, chairperson presentation of budget. So, I'm going to turn it right over to you, Chair.
Okay, all right, we're going to get started. So in your packets, they have the fancy binding on the side. You'll see on the what's labeled as page 1, but technically it's the 3rd page in. It'll show your resources. You should be seeing the same thing that you see up on the screen there. So if you're having trouble seeing the screen, then you've got that right there in front of you to look at if you need to. So going through the resources, over here to the left, under the general fund in blue, these are all of our resources coming into the district. So you've got your permanent rate tax, your operations levy income, the all funds that are remaining in our account at the end of this current fiscal year, the previous levy taxes that we expect to receive from previous year. We get the lease payments from Pacific West Ambulance. We put $5,000 in anticipated sales of surplus this next year and an anticipated $10,000 in highway billing for the next fiscal year. We'll talk about the Fema Grants towards the end. Other grants has $2 in it to hold the line item open for grants that we end up getting opportunities to apply for throughout the year that we don't always know what they are until they open up. Right now we're looking at one to the HPP through Oregon Health Authority just opened up to us, which is for medical equipment. We're looking at doing a grant for a new Lucas device. Not new, we don't have one, so for a Lucas device. So
What is a Lucas device?
the Lucas device is it's a machine that you put on a patient when you're doing CPR that does the compressions for you. So they're consistent, they never change their rate, they have the set depth, and you don't have to burn your manpower doing compressions. It does it for you, which means we get more hands to do other things on scene.
It's called Lucas.
Lucas,
How
yeah.
much is one of them?
It's about 17,000. Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be a grant for the Lucas plus the training to get everybody up to speed on how to use it on emergency scenes. So that, if we were to get awarded that, that'll be in next fiscal year for sure. And so that would go into grants other when we go in and have to add those funds in. And then conflagration, we will participate in conflagration this year because we have the staffing to do so. And so we'll be sending out type 6 when asked to for fires throughout the state and California if we have to, if they ask us to. So we anticipate that there'll be income coming in for that. It's probably going to be more than 5,000, but we put that in there to hold the line item open for the time being. So total resources 1.596. We have a serial levy that cannot go into the general fund. It has to be spent by the end of this year. It's on the final cycle of that levy's lifetime. Total resources, 1.7 at the end of the day. Here in the middle, these are our rates. So our district value is 433 million. It should be 439 million, but we lost 6 million due to urban renewal. So, and that only comes out of the general fund. So it's not, it seems like a lot, but when you start breaking it down, it breaks down into much smaller numbers. So for our permanent rate taxes, we'll be bringing in 341,000. For our staffing levy, we'll be bringing in 536,000. And then for the serial equipment levy, we'll be bringing in 105,000. That brings us 983 in tax base for the year.
Those two levies, the operation and serial have already been passed.
Yep, those two are already in
They're in
play.
place.
Yep. This is the final year for the equipment levy. So in November or next May, we'll have to either renew it, change it, do something with it, or it will just expire.
The 105.
Yeah, the 105. Yep.
Do you have any ideas of what you're going to spend it on?
Yes, we'll get to that. That's the final tab here.
Really quick, why is our number here greater than our number on our LB20?
Because you're seeing here the all funds, and what you're seeing on the LB20 is those funds, those all funds broken out into those different individual places.
Oh, I was just seeing total resources at the bottom. I saw 1.34.
Right.
9.
Right, because it's broken out on different forms.
Oh, okay.
So all the reserve funds for the building, the reserve funds for equipment, those are on other forms.
I thought that all had to carry forward to the general fund, but you're right.
Okay.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, and we go to the next one, it'll bring them back in
Right.
here in a minute.
Sorry.
Okay, so is everybody with me so far on the resources? Okay, so in the green, these are the forecasted for the next 4 fiscal years of what we'll bring in based off of 3% increased value, not counting new development to the district. Just 3% expected forecast. So,
What if we get that Afg grant?
that's gonna be in here too. That'll go into these 2 spots. I've got that separated here on this spreadsheet so we could talk about it and get direction from the committee at the end.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
So I'll get there.
We'll do a resolution if it comes to.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, it's just as long as we have a plan for both.
And
We do.
3% is just a standard number for the increases.
3% is the most it can go up per the state. So, but that doesn't, like I said, that doesn't account for new development. So, all right.
The operations levy, next year is the first year of the new one?
This one? Or this one?
Operations levy?
This one, we renewed it last year. No, we renewed it, last year in November. So this is the 5-year forecast for its lifetime right here. It's a 5-year levy
So 2020, 22, 23 is the first year
of the new.
5 year.
Yeah, and it renewed at the same value. So it's the new lifetime, but it's the same levy. Okay, in the operating budget, so I'm going to skip down first to the resources for the operating budget. So here you have the 671 all funds from the resource list. The 925 is the projected funding from the permanent rate and the general fund added together to give us the 1.596 that you saw on the resource page. So total projected income, 1.596. Total expenses for personnel services, operations, and material services, 919,399, leaving an unappropriated ending fund balance of 677,370.
What page are you on? Sorry.
Oh, I am on page, I skipped ahead to the resources so we can cover that quick first.
I got lost.
Page 5.
Thank you.
So, we'll be bringing the capital funding for building up to 125, bringing the capital funding for equipment up to 100, reserving 20,000 for contingencies. This brings our total capital to 245 for the year. We're holding over 325,000 for working rollover to get from July to November. till our taxes begin to come in, which leaves us with an approximate unappropriated funding balance of 107,370 for the year. Now, I put this in here just to, as a point of reference. If we renew the serial levy as an operations levy, it would then feed into the operations of the district, which next year would add 109,000 to our total funds for the year. So,
Okay, on my page 5, the bottom line, the total unappropriated fund balance is 104,870.
yeah, we had a change today.
Yeah, and personnel services and unappropriated any fund
So
balance
the
number.
correct number is 107.
The correct numbers on the screen. Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. We had some last minute changes here just a little bit ago.
So,
You'll also see one in the serial levy as well.
So basically, we're gonna decrease, in a sense, our reserves or net working capital from this year at 423 down to 325. So it basically decreased by 100,000.
Yeah, and I go to capital next, and I'll show you why.
Okay, perfect.
So, so this is the resources. So I'm going to go back up, which is going to take you to, I'll say the page number for you. Yeah, I got you right here. This is going to go to the top of page 2. Okay. So this is our personnel services. So our volunteer incentive program last year was 5,000, this year 3,000. Occupational medical evals, we haven't had any. I am working with Samaritan Occupational Health. We will be doing occupational medical evals on firefighters now, so that's why there's no line in there from before, because we didn't have it before. Lab fees are staying the same. Our lifeguard membership, Lifelight and lifeguard memberships are down just slightly. And our payroll went up from 336 to 437 because the 2 firefighters who were listed as temporary are listed in this budget as permanent. So if we get the SAFER grant, then the funding that's being used to keep them permanent will shift over to our capital, and we'll take use of the opportunity to have the SAFER funds coming in for the next 3 years. If we don't get the SAFER fund, our staffing's not at risk. Payroll taxes, 43, PERS, 65, medical, dental, and life is at 95, workers' comp is a little lower at 12.5, payroll expenses just slightly higher, overtime went up because more personnel, more overtime, and then deferred comp stayed the same. So we went from 577 to 687 at the end of the year, next fiscal year. Up.
Before you move from there.
Yep.
Your medical and dental.
Mhm.
So the cost is budgeted to be down, but you're adding 2 staff. Can you talk about why that is?
Yeah, so we have 2 people who are not going to enroll because they're covered under their spouse's medical.
Okay.
So we almost transitioned 2 for 2,
Got it.
which is very fortunate. So,
the workers' comp, are you getting an experience rating that's driving it down a little bit?
so we haven't had any injuries or any incidents that's driving it down. So it's also driving down our liability insurance as well.
Okay.
So as long as we can continue to operate safely like we have been, we should be on a good path.
Very good.
So I'm going to knock on wood for that one later for sure. So any other questions about personnel services? Okay. Operational costs. So our repairs maintenance went down slightly because we are finally caught up with deferred maintenance. All of our trucks are in service. All the upgrades that we've needed to make to them to bring them up to standard are done. So this 15 should be reflective of unexpected breakdowns or repairs throughout the year, not continued upgrades and deferred maintenance that we needed to catch up on. So that's why that's there. Fuel, I think everybody knows why fuel went up. I don't think that's going to be a question. Rescue 72's repairs, we haven't had very much issues with it, so I just dropped it down slightly. PPE, we dropped that down to 2 sets a year, plus gloves and hoods and et cetera that we need. Medical supplies stays the same. We actually have a very healthy relationship with Pacific West, and so when we use medical supplies on scene, we create a list for them, and at the end of the week, they bring us the supplies that we need. So the $5,000 is really only paying for supplies that they can't give us. And you know, they bill for those supplies when they transport the person, and so we're recovering our costs there. We're not really spending that much because we're getting our supplies back to us through that relationship. Our Zoll maintenance is set up based off of our AEDs and our cardiac monitors.
What is Zoll?
Zoll's the cardiac monitor, all of our AED and heart defibrillator machines, they're all Zolls. So we have a Zoll rep that comes out and does a maintenance on them, and that's what keeps the warranty up on them. Minor tools, $2,000 in case we have to have any repairs to any of our minor tools. Equipment, all of our generators, saws, the chainsaws, the CBAs, this is for parts and if we need to swap something out on them. Uniforms, we've switched completely over to the uniforms we're using now, so our costs are down on uniforms because we don't have to buy a big bulk of them like we did last year. Equipment testing, this is our hose testing, our ladder testing, our SCBAs have to be calibrated every year, our hazmat sensors have to be calibrated every year, our pumps have to be tested every year. So this lump sum of $10,000 covers all those different tests. We give $1,500 to CERT to keep their equipment up for the year. And then Check It is what we use for our fleet maintenance, and this is the annual fee for that software for all of our stations and all of our apparatus to be programmed into that software and then maintained. So that's operations for equipment and maintenance, and then training. We dropped, yeah.
About uniforms and equipment type stuff. I don't know whether it's come up in this district or not, but I saw a thing on the news the other day about some small town in Oregon that's now getting bulletproof vests for their firefighters.
So we already have them.
Oh,
They're carried on our engine. They're probably going to get moved over to the rescue though. But yeah, we've already got vests here.
it kind of shocked me when I.
It's mostly for active shooters because of the schools. And so if we have to go do something, we'll go in with law enforcement and they'll secure for us while we move from patient to patient if we need to. And so we have to have vests on. So we have vests already. Yep. Training, we took that down some for this year for out of district classes. We're still kind of recovering from COVID. There's not a lot of training still going on yet. I think everybody's still a little shy from COVID. So, but it will go back up over time. These are our fingerprint costs. Whenever somebody gets into the district and the first time they get a certificate with DPSST, they have to be fingerprinted, and then anytime anybody gets an EMS license, they have to be fingerprinted. So these are just the fees for fingerprints. We reduced our EMT scholarship down to one person per year, so that's $1,500 instead of $3,000. And then Target Solutions training is much like the Check It. It's a training database that tracks all of our training records for not just for the year, but for as long as we maintain that software. And it also provides us with online training that's predominantly EMS, but it has some fire stuff in there too. So it's really good when people are trying to catch up on hours because they've missed some drills and they just need to go in and do a couple of EMS classes on a computer to catch up a couple hours here and there. That really works out. So we've reduced from 81,000 last year down to 69,000 this year for the operations, materials and equipment there. Materials and services. So our association contribution is being reduced down to 24. Our district banquet, I dropped it down a little bit. We haven't been able to have a banquet for the last 2 years because of COVID, so maybe this year will be the year. Our accounting went up a little bit for inflation. Our audit is going down. We are getting new auditors, and we've gotten back an RFP, and for the next 3 years, it's going to be between $600 and $6,300 for the next 3 years. So it's way less than what we were paying before. So we don't have to worry about that going up anytime soon. Organ ethics went up a little bit. Legal costs, I'm putting them the same at 8,000 for now.
What's included in legal costs, if I may ask?
Anything that comes from either SDAO legal or local government law group, any kind of invoicing, any kind of tasks that we have to contact legal for, it all comes out of legal costs. So,
And Oregon mandated filings, like hearing notices and things like that.
yeah, yep. So it's kind of it's a little plethora of things. If we have to have a contract reviewed, it'll come out of that. If we, have an issue, it'll come out of that. So, so I put that the same for this year again. Office, so all of our subscriptions for computers and for our administration is 4,200. Our bank fees just went up slightly. Our office supplies went up because we're using more office supplies. Copier agreements in there, that's what it costs us per year for the copier machine. And then our membership dues for the county rope team, the International Fire Chiefs, the Special Districts Associations, Oregon Volunteer Association. Those are all the membership dues for the year to be parts of those groups.
So what membership did we drop?
We didn't drop a membership so much as we're not going to be paying as much to one as we were before.
Ah,
The volunteer one
So,
dropped, we had it at a higher number.
yeah, we were counting more people than we were.
just wondering, because, it's
So-
$1,300 difference there.
Yeah, that's, yeah,
Because a lot of them are based on how many members you have,
Right.
and
Yep.
it was set higher than it really needed to be.
yeah, yep. Phones and internet for the year are 4,500. Our active 911 system is 330. The majority of that line item was the CAD dump, and we're dropping the CAD dump. It hasn't even been working right anyway.
So is the
So-
increase in Pioneer to make up for that then, or what? Because,
No, that's because we've added 2 buildings of the internet and 2 buildings of the phone and 2 buildings of the power bill, and so, yeah. We also added Starlink out at Tidewater, so Tidewater Station now has internet service out there. So it means that they can do reports and things out at Tidewater now. So that's the cost for that for the year. Our AT&T went down. We went through and cleaned up our AT&T account. Eric did a lot of that, and so that's a decent little reduction there. And then all of our utilities are 18,000 for all the facilities for the year, and that's your power, your water, your sewer, your propane, everything, all utilities. Includes Tidewater and Five Rivers. Yep, because we have propane out at Five Rivers also. The SLR storage room that we have is a $2,500 a year lease. That's also where we store the reserve engine. The station maintenance, this is part of the new lease. So 40,000 for the year to meet the lease agreement.
That is supposed to be 45.
40.
40.
40. Yep.
Yeah.
We're going to be moving the boat down to the port soon. So we're paying for our moorage fee at $1,200 a year. And then we started up a grounds maintenance contract for all 3 stations to maintain all the vegetation and everything, especially out of Five Rivers, where it gets really out of control sometimes. And so that's $4,500 for the year for that. Our dispatching fees are a little bit higher, but they're still not as high as they would be if we didn't have the 911 tax coming in. Our fee would have been $58,000 for the year if we didn't have the 911 tax coming in. So it reduces it by a lot.
So that's why that's a huge reduction.
Yeah, yep.
And so the 911 tax is just put on everybody's phone bill, right? That's the 99-cent tax, right?
Yep. And the big bump on that was when they applied it over to cell phones.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to ask because I don't know.
Yeah.
It sounded like other people knew. In reference to the station maintenance, where it went from 2,000 to 40,000, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
So basically,
I'm missing.
We just signed an agreement with the city that we would add maintenance onto this station for $40,000 a year, and that would be in lieu of basically us paying rent. So we still have like a $0 rent on the building, but we're required to maintain the building at $40,000 a year. The part of the agreement is that we would get an appraisal as of July or the next month, right? Am I still on cue here? And so as we add maintenance and maintain the building, we're adding value to the building. If we ever wanted to buy it, we're going to buy it at what it values at today. So it's,
Prior to our own.
so basically everything we pretty much put into it, we're putting it in for ourselves if we ever decide to buy it.
Okay.
If not, then it basically improves it for the city to be able to sell it at a higher price, so it's still benefiting a good chunk of our tax base, so.
It
it's
has
kind
to
of
do
a-
with the ownership of this building and, with the city. And that's been going back and forth for years.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So at least finally-
I just
yeah.
thought, okay, everybody knows this but me.
Yeah.
I tune in and out, but.
No, you're good, so that is why you see that huge increase, but that's also why you don't see any like lease expense or rent expense for this building.
Yeah. So our simulcast fee for participating with the countywide simulcast is $44 for the year. It's just a little bit higher than last year. Public education, this is what Charlie requested for, it's mostly supplies for doing classes up at the schools, tours here at the station, and then we carry stickers on the vehicles, so when we come across kids here or there, we make sure we give them stickers, so it all comes out of that. And then our insurances. So our general liability, property, and auto for the district is 14.8, down from 15.6 last year, because again, very, very low to no incidents. So we're on a good track. And then our 3-year policies for our accidental death health policy and our 24-hour accidental death and dismemberment policy renew. So those are in here at those costs. They weren't in there because they were inside their 3-year cycle last year. So.
Okay, so those just renew every 3 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, which brings us to the end of material services, an increase from 130 last year to 162, which, if my math is correct, is less than the 40,000 that we had add in for the building. So we're actually lower on our material services this year than we were last year, if you were to take that 40 out. So
what about office supplies? Why is that so much less? I feel like the last few years of office supplies have
it's
been
higher.
expensive, and we're.
Yeah, I put it higher.
I've got 8,000, and then previous two historical data years are at 17,000 and 13,000.
For office supplies?
Yeah.
I got 6,000 from last year's, that was budgeted last year.
Budgeted, yeah, but I'm just
8,000.
looking at actual expense for the preceding 2 years. I don't remember what it's been so far this year, so I could be off base. I was just curious about that number.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some things that were going under office supplies that I didn't realize, so I wasn't taking those into account. And then we also had, last year, we had furniture purchases when we moved, for like, the conference.
All the different
and stuff like
changes,
that.
okay.
That was why it was so high in previous years. So, and then there was a couple other things, that we won't actually, that were just purchased, like we had to get a new computer for the workstation, and stuff like that, so things that won't be on this year.
Yeah. So that brings us back down to the resource page that we went over when we started, and that's why I wanted to go over that first, was so you guys would know the top numbers before we broke it down into the smaller numbers. And so that's why I jumped ahead like that. So hopefully that didn't confuse anybody. Does anybody need me to go back over this part again, or is everybody still good so far? We good? Okay. All right, so the 125, the 100,000 here, when we go over to capital outlay. So, in capital for building, we have the funds for the boat lift that's going to get installed down at the port. Just real quick, this is a lift system, so the boat doesn't actually sit in the water when it's not being used. It's a pneumatic system. The boat pulls up onto it and it lifts the boat out of the water and stays out of the water when it's not being used. If we get an emergency, we go down, you hit a button, it drops the air out of the lift, and then it puts the boat back in the water, and then we can deploy.
Why does our page say 38,000 and the screen says 18?
Because we got a new bid in yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So, we're going with it's actually a local vendor to Oregon, so keeping the money local too.
So
And,
it's 18.
Yes. Yep.
And then what's the probability of that happening this year? I think it's been on the past 2 budgets, so I'm just kind of throwing that out there. What do you think that probability is?
So we have a meeting with them next Wednesday to go over the details, but we're anticipating that it should be in place by the end of the year.
Okay.
So we're still waiting on the port for power and water. We
Oh.
cannot put the boat down there without power and water.
That makes
So,
sense. Yeah, it's gonna stay.
And we had to wait for the port to build their docks too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had a meeting with Roxy a week ago, and they are on track for getting power and water, and so the time frame should match up perfectly because we wouldn't spend that money till after November anyway. So by the time they get power and water in there by the end of the year, we'll have them come in and install it, and it's a 3-piece lift system, so they'll be able to put it in, and we'll finally have the boat down there, which means we'll have more space here in this station and faster deployment of our boat when we need to. So, you know. Tidewater Upgrades, technically, we should be done with this this fiscal year, but we put it in there just in case if we need to for upgrades. The repairs are done. The station is back open. The vehicles are all inside, all 3, not 2. You used to only hold 2. You couldn't pull the fire trucks to the back of the building because there was a beam that was too short, so you could only use the front half of the building. The entire building is now back in use, and at this point, we're trying to just get the water system for emergency water up there. That'll give us 2 refills on our tenders if we have a fire upriver. You don't have to come all the way back to town for a hydrant. You can go to that station instead. And then it'll also give us a water supply up there in case we need to wash the trucks or wash the station or anything like that. So
with most of the repairs and so on being done, why 20,000?
in case the drywall doesn't get done and it gets pushed to next fiscal year.
Okay.
The drywall comes in next month.
Oh,
If they're done and build out, it'll be in this fiscal year.
Yeah,
If they come in and they're not done, it gets pushed over.
yeah.
And so it's just in case funds.
And that'll be
So-
a wash because it would come out of our networking funds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Where is the cost for bringing water in there?
There's a spring on the property. We're gonna pull from the spring with a keep fill system, and it'll keep those tanks full all the
Is
time.
it a minor expense?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Is that
it
in the
wasn't much.
20,000 kind of?
No, most of that's already up there.
Oh. the
Yeah.
water
I went
supply-
through and
Yeah.
kind of built the systems as I went. I sat down one day and just went, okay, water system, what do I need? And just built it in my mind. And then went through and ordered all the parts that I could possibly think of to put in a water system. So yeah, it'll be pulling from the little spring there. So like Chief Mason said, there's enough water to fill if that pump doesn't work and then twice. But feasibly, it'll be on a float system where when it pulls out of that spring, as soon as it drops down, they fill the tender once, it'll drop down below that float, and it'll auto fill back up. So by theory, we should be able to have almost an endless supply of water out
Is
there.
that spring only, is that only for the Tidewater Fire Department situation, or does it take care of anyone in to connect to other community members up there where?
I don't know if it does.
So more importantly, do you have the water right to use the water from that spring because it's required under state law if you do?
Mhm. Yeah, that's part of the program that Eric's been working on. We've been working on this for the better half of last year to get this all put in place up there. This 20,000 is mostly for the drywall labor, and then the paint supplies to paint the drywall and everything afterwards. And then we have some electrical supplies that got to go in once the drywall's up. You know, the lights that'll attach to it and things like that. So this 20,000 is not, the water system's all pretty much there
Okay.
already. It just needs to be put together. So,
I think that's terrific that there is a water system there now too, so you don't have to come back to town to fill up the truck.
Yeah, and in the future, if we get another ISO eval, it'll contribute to our overall emergency water supply, which will help our score even
That
further.
should help with Tidewater score maybe a little bit.
Well, it's all district-wide,
Oh, it is,
so
okay.
yeah. It'll help with the overall score. Five Rivers Water Supply, this is kind of a similar system where we're gonna put tanks up there and have, but there's no spring or nothing up there to fill it from, so we're working to get the rights to be able to collect rainwater to fill them up over time. That's gonna be where we can use it for an emergency, but it also facilitates to be able to wash the trucks up there, wash the station floors out if we need to. Right now, there's no water up there at all. There's nothing. If we need to wash one of the trucks at Five Rivers, we have to drive them all the way back to town and then wash them and then drive them all the way back up. And by the time you get back up, it's like, what did you really accomplish? So, you know, especially if it's rainy out or something. So anticipated forecast of about 45 out of the 125 that's there, if everything was spent to the maximum. In the equipment reserve, there's 100, and that's basically our engine payment and the engine interest payment for this next year, for the 100 loan that we took to buy the new to us engine. So that's only going to spend about 21 out of that 100. So at the end of the year, we'll show a 157,721 unappropriated between the two funds remaining in those funds at the end of the year. And so we'll just, next year, we'll keep adding to those. And if we re-roll that serial levy to an operations levy, we'll be able to start putting away a certain amount of money every year and start building our savings for buying capital equipment, like a new engine later down the road. So,
And then that number is just different because of the different bid that had come in reference.
Yep.
to the third.
yeah, because you don't have that 38 up there, so you're subtracting 20 off of that, so.
And then, I may have missed it, but when I asked the question about the spring, does it supply water to anyone else in that community, or is it specifically for the Tidewater?
Each street up there, like Solstrom, which runs down Tidewater, Blueback, Little Switzerland, each one of those has their own kind of water supply system to themselves.
Okay.
So this is separate from that. So we
Okay.
wouldn't be pulling and you know, if we had a fire, we wouldn't drain the neighborhood with water. It would be
Yeah.
separate from that.
It's also not a constant pull, it's only a pull whenever those tanks drop down. And so if we use them, it'll pull from it, and then it'll sit full, and it won't pull anymore until we use them again, so. Okay, so the last one before we get to the FEMA grants is the serial levy. So the serial levy is anticipated to bring in 105,590 for the fiscal year. There is no rollover because it's supposed to be used every year, and we've got it down to right now unappropriated $2.28 at the end of the year, which is negligible. So I don't think anybody's going to complain that we
I
didn't.
don't want to see that money go to waste, all right?
Yeah. So I don't think anybody will complain that we didn't use it by the end of the year at $2.28. So getting into where's that money going to go? So we've got a list of projects and equipment here. So vehicle diagnostic software, this is so we can plug into our vehicles. When they throw a code, right now we have to take them to either Fleet, or in some cases we have to take them all the way to Eugene to get them ran. This makes it to where we can run them and then fix them on site if it's something that's within our purview.
And it's not like a mechanic shop with your personal car. When you take one of these engines to a place to have it diagnosed, it's $300 or $400 just to have it diagnosed. And then the repairs on top of that.
Yeah.
So,
And that's something that is for this station, or it's?
It's for the entire district. All the vehicles in the district will plug into it.
Okay,
So-
and it costs 12,000 one time, or to continue?
One time. Yep, it's a software package.
And is that something that if another fire department says they have an issue, that can be utilized here?
We
as
can help
well?
them with it, yeah.
I didn't get one, I didn't choose one.
We charge them. We like to, friendly neighbors kind of concept, so,
Okay.
Subcontract.
you know what I mean? Yeah.
Just wondering.
You never know when you need them to come in and help you on a fire or something, so,
Joe, the equipment was not just
Yeah.
capital, it's not just diesel, it actually covers 5 different styles of motors. So,
yeah. We need a new radio programming laptop. Ours is running Windows 95, so we figured it's time to upgrade that so that we can program. And we also have new radios with new software, and that software doesn't like the old software, so it's just time to upgrade that. The Oceanid Rapid Deployment Craft is from the Water Rescue Team's request. This is a inflatable rescue for when we have low tide, or if we need to go out into Ekman Lake where we can't run the boat, or if we have to go upriver where it gets a little bit more shallow. This gives us an inflatable to be able to move patients with, so they don't have to walk through the water holding hands with our rescuers. They can actually go on this.
Does it stay inflated, or does it
No.
inflate it on demand?
We
Does it
inflate
have
it.
a system?
We inflate it with one of our SCBA bottles.
Okay.
So it's got adapters and everything to inflate off of one of our air bottles. So, yep. Engine continuity project is one of our goals, to bring all of our engines so that they mirror image each other in equipment. So this is the cost to get all that equipment to complete that goal. So all of our engines, if you go to one and you're expecting it to have a specific tool that the other one has, it will. Where I wish I could say that that's the case today, but it is not. So that's a goal that we want to get to. 4,500 for technical rescue equipment to move up to rope rescue technicians. We sit at operations because we're limited on equipment. This will bring us up and close that gap so we can bump up to technicians over the next year, probably 2 years to be honest. Fire hose, we are kind of like the equipment continuity. We want to make sure that all of our fire hose matches on all our engines. So this is going to purchase the fire hose needed to finish that. We got some grants last year for this, and I'm going to write another grant this coming year for this also. So you could really consider this $5,000 as matching funds for those grants, not just purchasing hose straight out, right? Vehicle upgrades, there's a plethora of vehicle upgrades. We have some vehicles that need some new tires. We have vehicles that one of them needs a brush guard so we don't blow a radiator with a deer. We need some just minor upgrades to a bunch of vehicles, so that's a lump sum in there for that. Air system for the station, that's for this station, is to run shore lines to the vehicles to keep their air tanks up. Right now we only have one airline, and so it only feeds one truck. We have multiple vehicles that use pneumatic braking systems. So in order to keep them from having a delay in response by waiting for the air system to fill up, we run a shoreline to it. So this will give us a bigger compressor and then the shorelines to keep those systems up to speed. Station phone paging, it's a very small amount, but we put it in there anyway. This gives us the ability to page from phone to phone when you need to talk to somebody instead of getting all your steps in on your Fitbit by walking across the station. The brush rigs tires, those are quite a bit more because we're taking the brush rig right now has street tires, what we would consider street tires, and its basic use is for off-road, which is why it got stuck last year. So yeah, we got the street brush tires. So we're going to replace them with some actual tires that are rated for all-terrain off-road. So that we separated that out from vehicle upgrades because it was more. It was a lot more. To meet House Bill 2560, where all of our meetings, including tonight's meeting, is being brought to you via Central Coast Fire and Rescue. We need to get our own streaming equipment. This was at the request of the board. So this is the funding needed to purchase the district's own streaming equipment and not rely on the donation of somebody else's. Station security personal ID, this is for all the stations. This changes our doors to our stations out to RFID system and gets rid of the hundreds of 4-digit codes that we have. So now when somebody comes into the district, we have to issue them a government ID now. That's actually a requirement. So this gives us the system, the printing system to do the ID cards. The ID cards come with an RF chip in them. The majority of the cost is the door systems per door. And so you basically just take your ID card and touch it to the door and it'll open. And if somebody leaves for whatever reason, instead of having to go and program every door like we do now, we just take that card off of the system. And so that card will no longer open doors. And so they could throw it away, bring it back to us, whatever. They can't get access to the station if they're no longer with us anymore. So,
Well, that's,
And
Yeah.
those locks are expensive, because the city looked into them too.
yeah,
Well,
we
these
just,
ones, I got the ones that are not only the RF or the ID card, but it'll have a keypad on it too, so, you know, a code could be assigned to like this room, for after hours use, and simple 4-digit code that'll only work for that night, so that you can only use it for this time to this time, and then it locks it, goes out.
it sucks because we bought those locks like 5 years ago, and they're pretty spendy at times, so I guess it was kind of a bad decision.
well, they're already, a lot of them are already showing a lot of wear too from corrosion and whatnot, you know, the buttons. and
Yeah,
things,
just
so-
looking back, probably wasn't the great, because like,
Yeah.
we had RFI or whatever this is at that time, I mean, I'd used that stuff different times, so probably should have been
Yeah, I mean, you could always just back your truck into one of the doors and open it up that way, so
mistakes, I guess.
there's that too.
So that security system is gonna be just either, is it gonna be two-factor authentication where it's card and the PIN?
No,
Or
it's
is it
just
going to
one,
be just one?
just the one. We can do a PIN if we want to, but this is just where we could program that ID in, and the ID is the only one you need to get in. So,
So then we just gotta make sure that people are reporting if their IDs are stolen.
yeah, yep,
Yeah, because this is like these systems, it doesn't hold a date, there's no date, no time, no nothing in them, it's just a code, so there's no way of looking up when the code is
Who
out.
is, where, when.
yeah. This will actually tell us who came in at what time and when, and
So-and-so just
so-
walked in the
They
door.
need to be temporary cards that only work during certain times, so like when we have people who reserve this room for other meetings, you can set that card or the PIN to where it allows them access only at this time, but after this time, if they forgot something, they have to come back the next day.
yeah, yep.
So, yeah, because right now, it takes about an hour to program one code.
And the cost would be higher, but we were able to strike up an agreement with PacWest, so the PacWest door, they're gonna provide their own lock for theirs. So yeah. Vehicle striping packages, so,
I vote for flames.
so a couple of years ago, we adopted a version of the high school's mascot and basically put him in some firefighting gear and with a helmet and a nozzle in his hand. So we've been switching our trucks over just little by little over time, so it's not one big chunky burden of cost to get the striping and the logos on the doors, everything consistent. So this is just continuing that program. We've got putting up a black top on the wildland rig and putting the right striping on it so that it has the right reflective striping on it, and then so that's that vehicle striping packages. We'll just do a little bit by a little bit till all of our vehicles are the same later down the road. Emergency fuel depot, this is part of a bigger program. We're working with Pacific West, and we're even going to talk to the city as well. So this will essentially be our chunk of it, of having an emergency fuel site here on this property. One of the lessons we learned from Echo Mountain was that when the town gets evacuated, all the fuel stations shut down. So when we were up on Echo Mountain, our brush rig, while the truck itself had plenty of diesel, the fuel tank that runs the exterior pump on it and throws water did not have enough fuel because it's a much smaller tank, and we've been working for all day. So I got sent on a task to try to go find fuel, and I went to every single fuel station, including the card locks in Lincoln City, and all of them were closed, and we could not access fuel. And so we ended up having to bring a fuel truck in later on into the operations, but it started to hinder our ability to fight fire. Everybody's lived in this town long enough to know that after a certain time in the evening, if you didn't get fuel, you're out of luck, or you're driving to Newport. So, you know, if we need fuel in the middle of the night, we can't get fuel. This would give us the ability to have fuel, whether it's late at night or whether we have a lot of emergencies going on and we're burning through a lot of fuel. This would give us that ability, and the setup that we picked is a setup that can be moved. It's not a permanent site fixture. So if you know, if we did end up moving the station later on down the road, the fuel site would move as well. We just have to do a new concrete pad. So This is not a guaranteed to be spent line item just yet. It's still something that's in the works. This is our portion of it though, if we were to do something about that. So, responder field jackets, these are essentially rain jackets. Some of our people have some of our people need some. This is to close that gap, give everybody rain jackets. Mostly when we're on medical calls and we're not wearing our turnouts, it's nice to have something to keep you dry. So, workout equipment, we do have a subscription and we do go over to the local workout facility. However, sometimes people want to do workouts either late at night or way early in the morning, and their partners don't. So this is just a couple pieces of machines to be able to get by until, unless they want to go over to the gym. So this is the change that's not going to be in your packets. So in your packets, it should have shown a $7,500 in the unappropriated down below. Is that correct, what you guys see on yours? So in order to close that gap, I went in and I put tools and equipment line item in so that $7,500 can be used for purchasing tools and equipment over the next fiscal year as we identify the need for it without having to go in and do a resolution to move that money because there wasn't a line item for it. So that was the change that's in there. We have more people, we need more lockers. So I put some money in there for the PPE lockers, and these are the metal lockers that are the cancer compliant. So if our gear is decontaminated or contaminated, and we need to go decontaminate the room, we can spray them and it doesn't cause damage to the lockers or anything. And then the last line item there is for a second battery operated positive pressure fan for the engine. So the one we have now will get moved to our reserve engine, and this new one will go on the first out engine. And it's used for ventilation on fires and hazmats, and whenever we have to move air around, we use PPV fan. And so by it being battery operated, we're not limited to having to carry extra fuel, and we don't have to drag a cord around. So it makes it a lot more user friendly for us. So overall, that brings us to $105,590 in costs, $105,92.28 for the funding, $2.28 left over, negligible amount that I don't think is going to get us anywhere. Red flags on the audit. I doubt. Right, Brett?
You'll be in the newspaper.
We should be okay. $2.28.
Newspaper,
So yeah, I think we're okay there. So any questions about that before I move on to the FEMA grants, which will be the last portion for the evening? Everybody good so far? Okay, so moving over to FEMA grants. Don't pay too much attention to these numbers. The two numbers that are on here is 467.53.28 for the safer.
What page is this, Jim?
For this isn't on a page. This is just up here.
So we don't have it?
No, it's not in there. 401,690 for the AFG grant. So safer, this is the cost of personnel for 3 years. This 401,690 AFG grant is the cost for a new tender for the district, which is one of our water movers. So it's a new apparatus. It's a new tender to go up to Tidewater station. So these were not listed on the resources on the one that is in your book, because we have not been notified by FEMA if we are or are not going to be awarded those grants.
You've already
So
filed for them?
we've applied for them and we're waiting to hear if we get them or not.
When do we hear July, right?
No, normally we would have heard by now. Nobody's heard. I've contacted other chiefs. I've talked to even the Rosenbauer rep who, watches it very closely, and nobody's heard. I'm gonna assume it's because COVID's just got everybody delayed. But who knows? There really hasn't even been any news about it at all. I thought I got an email the other day with an update, and it was just a survey about how FEMA Go is doing, so, for the website. So,
Part of the problem is they're trying to move the safer grant and all their other grants over to their FEMA.
Yeah.
And we crashed it by doing it.
Yeah, that was another problem. So a lot of the deadlines also got pushed because of that. So when we turned ours in, we turned them in on time. A lot of people who couldn't get in their FEMA Go couldn't turn those in, so they moved the deadlines further back so that they wouldn't miss out on them. So the question is because we don't know if we have these or not, we have two options. One option is to just leave them out and do a resolution if we get awarded them later, which is what Brett was talking about earlier. The other option is to throw them into the budget and approve the budget with them in there. If they don't get awarded, we don't spend that money. So it's money in and money out. There never was money in, so.
What's the easiest way to do it?
Well, I'm gonna defer that to Brett because it's gonna fall on Brett. So, doing a resolution or throwing them in there, which one do you think?
Doing a resolution is probably the cleanest way, because then it gets documented.
Okay.
I'd rather keep them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also,
Yeah, it's, that way you can see the trail.
Can
Yeah.
I hear a motion to do that?
yeah, that would be,
A
I move
second?
that we adopt the budget without the FEMA, without the grant
I
allocation.
second that.
okay. Yep. Okay, so then we don't have to worry about any of that, and that means we don't have to do anything with them until we do get awarded.
Okay, can I correct my?
A new
my
tender,
motion?
water truck.
Recommend.
It's a 2,000 gallon tender that'll be up at the Tidewater station.
Yeah, I know.
And it's a wildland urban interface tender, so it's an all-wheel drive with pump and roll capabilities. So it'll be good for if we have to go on logging roads and things, so. Yep. It'll replace a 1981 tender that is an ARF setup tender that we got a long time ago, before my time, and has a Volkswagen secondary engine, gas-fed engine in it to run the pump. So you have to fill the truck with diesel to drive the truck, and you have to fill a secondary fuel tank with gasoline to run the pump. And so you have two engines that you're maintaining, and yeah, so.
The vein of my existence.
It probably reached its serviceable life a long time ago.
About 3 decades ago, yeah.
And then is that sold as surplus or become part of?
That'll be sold off as a surplus if we get this new tender. Once the new tender comes in, it'll be sold off as surplus if the board declares it surplus. So,
Surprisingly enough, the last tender that was in chance that we surplus, I honestly thought we'd only get about 4,000 or 5,000 for it. Wound up getting 8,000 for it. It went to sat in Florida forever down there. What is that? I'm losing it.
I would say the Keys, but it went out of country.
No, it's, yeah. it went out
Like
of
the
country.
Grand Cayman Islands or something like that.
Doesn't have
So-
fresh water. So they distill the ocean water, desalinate it, and all around all the villages. So
Yeah.
that's what
They
it's.
probably- That's amazing, so.
Yeah.
So it sounds like foundation's gonna need a couple of those.
Yeah. Okay, so that then means we don't have to make any changes to the budget because we don't have to move those numbers over into the resource page. So that means that the presentation you just got is currently accurate and up to date then. So,
We approve the budget as submitted.
All right, hold on.
So we have public comment first?
Yeah, a couple questions here. So, sorry, I just went to the bathroom, drank a late afternoon coffee. So, if we get those two grants,
yeah.
is that, in the grand scheme of things, is that just gonna build up our reserve funds? Because, especially for like, the one for the two employees, basically, we've already budgeted that into the budget, right? So if we get to 200 whatever thousand a year, right? Does that just like increase our reserves by 200 some odd thousand? or-
It'll go into general fund.
It would go in,
Unless it's, we appropriate it to.
so it would just
Move over,
be
transfer.
carryover then, right?
Yeah.
And
More
then we
than
can
likely.
throw that to like equipment reserve would be.
So, yeah, so those funds would come in, like Brett says, would come in, and the funding that's there that we were gonna use will bump over to capital.
Okay.
So it'll come in and then move those or others over. The biggest point is with having, paying the money instead of waiting for the safer, the biggest point is to ensure that we don't have an issue with staffing.
Yeah,
So they become permanent. We don't have to worry about whether the safer comes in September or not.
yeah, I get that, yeah.
We maintain our staffing levels and can maintain our ISO level, especially since our ISO was factored at a 5.4 for
Yeah.
staffing. So,
And then so, on the 100,000, that basically we would be dropping down our reserves in theory. So basically, that's just because we have the big capital outlay on that levy, correct? And that's not gonna be an every year thing. I just wanna make sure that it's not gonna be a planned thing where we're gonna be dropping that down 100,000 every year.
No. Matter of fact, if we switch the serial levy over into an operational levy, well, yes, it'll drop down to a 5-year levy instead of a 10-year levy. It'll feed into our general fund though, which means that we can move that money into capital and use it to save money up to buy, apparatus or equipment over time if we need to.
Do that apparatus plan of
Right.
making sure we have the funds and 10
Right.
years to buy a new truck when we need to and rotating basically. Right?
Yeah,
And it helps
exactly.
rotate into that one.
Yeah, and so the obviously the fire engines cost the most. They're anywhere between $450,000 and $550,000. But then you've also got smaller vehicles. If we need another brush rig, those are about $250,000. If we need a staff vehicle, that's about $70,000 at the end of the day after it's all outfitted. So that'll just give us the ability to start throwing funding into capital for savings.
Okay.
So that when we identify, hey, we need another whatever, we can look at that fund and say, okay, well, it's there. Do we want to do it?
Yeah, so basically Chief Mason's idea for the next 10 years basically would be to that, we're saving money and then we're rotating our engines kind of like in a downhill motion. So we'd get a new one, we rotate one up, Tidewater, that truck would then get rotated out to Five Rivers and then the old one would be, pushed to wherever, right, sold.
Right.
So that in theory, we're not sitting here in a situation where in 5 years, we have to go out to the public and say, hey, we need a new fire truck for $750,000. We need to pass a bond, otherwise we're SOL. So then we have a plan where it's just rotated and in theory, you would never have to pass.
Yeah, as long as we can keep the amount coming in higher than the inflation, then we wouldn't have to do that. I'm not gonna make that promise that we won't have to go out and ask for money for an engine or something because, or if development starts bringing in 3- and 4-story housing and we have to go out and get a ladder truck, and even a smaller ladder truck today is running at $900,000 plus for that. So, saving up that amount of money, it'd take a long time to do that. So, but yes, the plan is to bring in funding to be able to build capital funds so that we don't have to go ask the public every single time we need to buy an apparatus. Because right now we have what we're doing right now is we're refilling reserve funds. We're not actually building upon them. We're just refilling them back up to the operational level that we had them before.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we go and we spend $20,000 on drywall, then the next year we would need to put $20,000 back in there to bring it back to where it was. That's not building funding. That's having a reserve account and just maintaining it.
Yeah.
We need to get to where we're building savings and being able to buy capital equipment. So, yep. It's not getting cheaper to run fire trucks and pay pure personnel. So there's going to be, talks in the future about levies and things as we fight inflation. One of our levies, our main staffing levy, has not been increased in 10 years by the time it's done with this current lifetime. So in 10 years, we haven't asked the voters for anything further to maintain our firefighters, but we've had 10 years worth of 3 to 6% inflation that's hit us for those costs. And so, it's going to get to a point where that coin's going to flip and the inflation is actually hurting us more than our growth in our overall budget.
Yeah, I'm not sold on that, but I think, tax levies go up 4% on average, right? Our incomes go up 4% on average, Brad?
3%.
Well, the minimum's 3 as long as there's inflation, but then with new buildings, right? If we have new buildings,
Yeah,
then
new
it goes up, new development, or if somebody buys a house, then it increases that automatically, right?
Yeah, and improvements too factor into that.
Yeah.
If you make improvements to the home, they will increase your tax base.
Yeah.
We'll also
So
go up
you do
when
need
urban
to remember,
renewal's
though,
over too.
That in the urban renewal area, we have a frozen tax base.
Oh, do we?
And so, in urban renewal areas are usually in places of growth.
Yeah.
Because the whole thought process is to use the monies that you're getting from that growth to put into infrastructure, so you don't have to keep going to the taxpayers for, for money too, for a period of time. And the other taxing entities give up their portion of that increase for the period of time that the urban renewal area is in place, with the thought being that when that urban renewal area ends, when it's either got a date or it's got a dollar amount. And when it sunsets, then the next year, all of those taxing agencies get to reap the benefit of that reallocation and those higher, the higher costs.
Gotcha.
The recent urban renewal, how long is that for?
That's actually for a dollar amount, not a period of time. And there has not been development, but the city is looking at some alterations to the urban renewal area. I don't know yet what those will be. We haven't, we're looking at.
Is there somewhere you can look at the geographical boundaries of that district?
Pretty much it's kind of an odd shaped thing, but for the most part right now, it is the developable land around Ocean Hills.
Oh,
And
so it's south of
the-
town.
And the Ocean Hills and the area between the industrial park, that whole area in there,
Okay.
which isn't currently, there is some activity there, but not, the reason the city had done it way back when was because we had anticipated with the Naples project that there was going to be a lot of work being done and therefore.
So if that actually gets developed out there, let's just say there's more building out there, does that become ours or is that Yacht's?
I think that's, because Ocean Hills is the end of our boundary,
Right.
so that would actually be ours.
Yeah, so that
So
does,
that does go into Yacht's.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
That's amazing.
So I guess that does,
That's what we should start charging.
Kevin, that is actually a good point.
I don't know, I mean, I would make the argument that would be us.
Because if it's not in our district, then we're not giving up that increment, so.
Yeah.
Right,
I don't know.
yeah.
Thought,
I don't
got a
There-
little bit, but.
The southern border of our districts is very confusing. You will go into Central Coast, out of Central Coast into Yachats, back into Central Coast again, and then back into Yachats. And then there was this one house that we discovered out in the middle of nowhere that had nobody. It was just forgotten.
I used to try to insure those.
They got Walport ambulance.
Oh, that's right, it had Walport ambulance on there, so I don't think they're gonna show up anytime soon. So, apparently that house has not had to call 911 in a number of years, so.
It actually just got annexed into Gillis.
Did it?
The county annexed it.
Okay, good, so it's covered by somebody now. So,
Yeah, trying to figure out which district the house was in for insurance was just a nightmare. Nobody, I called both fire districts and, well, I don't know, I don't think it's ours, so maybe it's Yahat, so.
yeah.
Yahat, no, I think it's,
Yeah, we had, when
give it to Seal.
when the insurance company calls us and wants to know the ISO rating, we have to be very specific with the address. It's okay, what's the address, and we have to go
You'd be
look.
surprised how many
So,
burn permits we get that are not our district.
oh yeah, lots of
I
those,
just forwarded each of y'all, they're still wrong.
yeah.
Figure.
There's a lot of people who really do not know what fire district they're actually in.
Yeah.
So they just know that when they call 911, something shows up. So, so any more questions?
So
I have,
Budget question?
I have some. On LB 20, that net working capital number should be 482,631.57. Your number's spot on here, your 671,000.
Yeah, the all funds.
It's spot on, but
Okay.
that needs to be updated. And then I would like to split out the sewer and water from the electricity.
Yeah, we'll just have to pull all the invoices and then split it out.
It's
to
about
make sure.
$3,000.
Should be 3,200.
It'll be about, actually, it's gonna go up 7%, so I think we should probably go about 3,500,
36. Put some cushion in. Did you catch that, Wendy?
3,600. So that would put, for 8237 would be 3,600, and 8238 electricity. Propane would drop down to 14,400.
Okay.
Do we need?
Do you break that out?
Seems like we've had a few changes. I just want to make sure our LBs are fine, right? So we had that. Then you were talking about the 7,500. Was that transferred on the LB forms, or do we need to carry that over as well?
That's 7,500 for the serial levy.
Serial levy is okay.
That's gonna carry over fine. We don't need to make a
Yeah.
motion. We don't need to make that part
I
of the
made that
motion.
one the other day. That one didn't come up today.
Okay.
It was after we sent out the stuff.
Oh, okay, but it's right on the LB form. Okay.
Can someone explain what LD stands for?
It's,
It's a good question.
local,
It's
I'm trying to remember. That's funny you asked me that.
Yeah, I think it is
It's
local budget.
Local,
Local budget.
local budget, thank you, Doug.
It is the state
I should know
form
that.
that we have to submit to inform the state of our budget, and then that's what they use when they do the audit.
So you say LD and then a number, is the number the line?
There's a
it's on
number
the
for each
page.
form, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have LBs in that packet right there.
Yeah, they're not, yeah, we don't
So-
have them there.
All of this gets transferred into LBs when we report it to the state, because each one has a different form, has a different requirement on it.
Plus, this has to be voted on by the board, basically. And this is the document that they actually have to agree to.
So, my question, so what's not in this budget that you wish was?
Oh, that
That's
could
an
be.
excellent question.
6 more firefighters, 3 fire trucks,
Dream list.
about 12 million for a new headquarters out of the tsunami zone. You know, we're doing good. So, you know, our budget is healthy. Our staffing is full and we've maintained it. We've had 0 losses in staffing for the last 2 years. We had one close call because Grand Ron almost tried to take one of ours, but we kept him.
The costs are coming down too.
Yeah,
Have been.
yep. So, you know, all in all, we're doing really good. We're still running a lot of mutual aid for the districts around us, and we're not complaining about that. We're happy to help. We're fortunate to be able to help, I think. And we've made a lot of progress in a very short amount of time, and there's a lot of progress still to be made. But we're doing pretty good. Suffice it to what you may read here and there. So,
And adding
yeah.
on to that, we did get numbers on a new fire station in the last year since the last budget meeting, and
Yep.
they weren't good. They were roughly $12 million, which I wasn't super stoked about. Spending that kind of money.
Next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking, I guess when we went to embark on that whole rodeo, we were looking at 6, maybe kind of like Johans, I think they started at 6 to 8 million, and I was hopeful that we would start in that same area.
Yep.
But I mean, just looking at it, I mean, good Lord, I don't know if as a community we want to.
It's not just up and down, it's also sideways.
Yeah, that wasn't even,
Costs are just, and availability, you have to order stuff months in advance. You're
Yeah.
ordering windows before you dig the hole in the ground, you're ordering trusses before you pour concrete. You order your cabinets 18 weeks in advance. It's,
You sound excited about it.
that was,
that's all you gotta do.
that wasn't even all new construction. That was revamping the station to try to make
And
it.
then we asked them to take out anything fancy, and it still only came down to like 10 million.
Yeah, we looked at some other properties. We went out and actually, looked at them and tried to, see if they could work, but they had extensive excavation that was required for them. So you were taking it from building a $10 to $12 million fire station from the ground up, because it's all new construction at that point, and then adding on an additional $2 to $3 million in excavation just to make the property work. Not to mention the fact that they were all underdeveloped properties, so there was no utilities. They were all at the street. You had to bring them all into where the facility would be. And these are essential facilities, so they're all driven by ORS now at the state level, so they have to be seismically hardened. You're not talking about just throwing up a building. You're throwing up a federally mandated building that's required to withstand a certain level of shaking, so that you can still get fire apparatus there. I mean, there's no roads to drive on, but you can get them out of the building, so.
Oh, we need those
Yeah.
big tires. haven't, haven't the state and FEMA funded other projects to move
Mhm.
emergency responders out of tsunami zones and floodplains?
Yep, we've been talking with FEMA for the last almost year now, trying to get assistance, even if it's not paying for the whole thing, but even just contributing to it to bring the cost down. We've hired a grant firm that's actively out there trying to find grants with us to try to get grants, and there's just nobody's giving them out right now. And they say, well, there could be funding coming available, and so we just kind of sit tight and hope that we could get at least a chunk of it taken care of, if not the whole thing. So I know a while back, and Rita could probably talk about it, is that they moved the schools from right here
Yeah.
up out of the tsunami zone, you know, and that was all done through FEMA funding. So, you know, they've already done millions and millions of dollars of development here through FEMA. If we go back out, you know, it's going to be hard to convince them to spend millions and millions and millions more when they just did it not that long ago.
But we still had to
So-
pass the bond to build those schools up on the hill, so
Yep.
keeping that in mind, I mean, even though they had FEMA grants, I mean, I think we were
The
looking at.
bond amount would be much lower.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
we were looking at 1.2 or something like that is what we thought we could get, or what the firm thought we could get at this point. So it's still, in the grand scheme of those things, in that 12 or 10 to 12 million dollar.
The other side about revamping the station is that there are seismic grants for the state if it's a current existing structure, that they will give you seismic money to cover all the seismic costs of bringing that building up to seismic. And so when we had the engineers come in to tell us if this building could even be seismic in the first place, or even continue to be an essential facility, part of that contract was for them to write and manage that grant on our behalf, and that's still on the table. They're just holding until we figure out what to do. So, yeah, that's $2 million. If you can justify all the costs, it's $2 million in grant funding from the state just for seismic, right there. So that cuts the bill down by $2 million right off the bat. But there has to be enough of the building to get to the $2 million.
That seismic event that's big enough that you're gonna need those seismic upgrades is also gonna bring the water, so.
Well, so to get a wave big enough to come all the way into the station, it have to be a
80 to 90 foot tall tsunami wave.
80 to 90. And
More
what?
would be non-existent.
Yeah. What do they say would be the level of the earthquake for that though? Like a 8 or?
Right off of our shore, we had 9, right off our shore.
So at that point, I mean, yeah. So getting out of the tsunami zone, yes, would obviously be the best thing that we could, but you've also got to find a place to go to that's going to be fiscally responsible to be able to afford it, you know? So,
But even if you built, let's say up on the hill, this is where the people are, so you need your emergency here.
yeah.
Well, we also have our distance requirements too.
Yeah, we have distance requirements by ISO. We have, the one nice thing about this building is we have direct access to 34 and 101, which are the main routes of you know, movement throughout our community. So if we were to build, say we built up by Dahl, there's no direct access down to 101 or down to 34 without going through a bunch of neighborhoods full of kids playing all day.
Use the street.
Yeah, we'd have to put a street in to make it,
Come
you
out of
know,
activation.
so, yeah. And that's gonna add, how much would it be to build a street, pave a street, another couple million onto that,
The
so.
starter zone now is $1 million.
Oh, yeah, yep, yeah,
Actually, that.
in the valley. So,
You also have to take into consideration the wear and tear on the apparatus coming down the hill. You take 40 to 60,000 pounds and try to stop it at 101, you're going to left or right.
yeah,
So those brakes, each drum on that side to replace the brakes, is about $1,200. If you start doing that code 3, you know, 10, 20 times a day for a month, all of a sudden now instead of replacing them maybe once every couple of years, you're definitely doing it every year.
yeah.
Because those things are gonna go.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always wanted to have a station out of the tsunami zone. And that's always been the goal of mine since I started on the board. And
It's
I've never
doable.
been able to figure out a way to make it plausible.
It's doable. It's just gonna be a matter of, you know, who's gonna contribute to the cost, you know? And to put that all on the taxpayers in our demographics is not, it's not
Right.
gonna happen. So we have to try to find some grants, we have to do some more pancake feeds, I don't know. We gotta
And
do
we
something.
certainly have not, I mean, we have never
So-
taken it off, you know, we have never not said, or never said that we were not going to look for property for.
Yeah, I think we've always been looking. I think it's
Out
always
of
been
the
on the
tsunami
table.
zone.
Yeah. Yep. But we're kind of getting off task. I think
Yes,
we should
we are.
try to get the
Trying
budget.
to get the budget. Yeah.
Does anybody, so if there's not any more questions, then I think we could pick up where you left off?
Susan made a motion
I
to,
move that we approve the budget as submitted and corrected, updated, whatever we've done tonight.
Yeah. Can-
Do we want to do public comment first? Is there anybody?
I thought that's what we were doing.
I don't know. I just saw the two guys over there, so of the public. Maybe we missed too much to get caught up. I trust you guys.
I recommend its adoption.
We lowered your pay.
Well,
Wait, discussion.
And part of the motion is that we recommend to the board of directors the adoption of this budget as discussed tonight.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Brett, do you know if we have to have a motion to approve the levying of the property taxes?
No, that'll get
No,
done
that's
at the board meeting in
It's done.
June.
Thank you, Susan, because last time we
Well, I
forgot
thought
to
we
do
had
that,
to
move it on.
recommend.
She just told me to do it.
There's a resolution that's done in June
Uh-huh,
that legitimizes
right, okay.
the collection of the
Okay, so I
taxes.
guess implicit in the recommendation to approve the budget as submitted, we're also tacitly recommending that they approve the tax levy in the amount that is.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't recall we had to do stuff anyway.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and spending your time.
You know what I mean.
I appreciate it. I do.
Yeah, the recorded record.
And do you
That's
have
right.
to
They have
adjourn?
to approve
What's that?
You have to do adjourn?
the budget.
Yeah.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I move we
And they do
adjourn.
the resolution. Yeah.